Jonathan, you were a major in the Israeli Navy for over 4 years. Curious to know what that journey was like and what were some of the biggest learnings from that experience that have helped shape your professional career.
So I served for 4.5 years in the Israeli Navy SEALs. It's a rigorous training course, and regretfully, everybody in Israel needs to join the military. And I say regretfully because I long, like a lot of my peers and friends, to a world where that's no longer necessary. I think that what the main thing that you learn very early on when you're training for the Navy SEALs is that how much is the attitude that you adopt, how much the attitude can affect the actual results. And we had this famous saying that they used to constantly reiterate, which is, it's all in your head. I mean, this was the saying, it's all in your head. So hardship, and you go through training, which is the idea is to push you to your limits. It's deliberately to push you to the limits before you can, before you do proper physical damage to yourself. It's to push you the furthest your limit from a mental capacity. So as an example, every day for the course of 2 years, you would get up at early hours of the morning, whether it's winter, whether it's rain, whether the sea temperature is 8 degrees or 12 degrees. And usually it's more around 12 degrees or 14. You'd go swimming for a long duration, and it's cold. And the last thing that you want to do is go in the water. It's literally difficult to breathe to begin with. And through those experiences, you start to understand that it is a lot in your head. And even a skinny guy like myself can then qualify as a combat Navy SEAL. And that's where I served for 4.5 years. So I think the biggest thing that I took from there is that if you apply yourself to something and you allow yourself to explore areas which are beyond your own preconditions, your own pre-perception of what is possible, then what you can achieve is limitless.
Amazing. And so, following that, following your stint at the Israeli Navy, you then got into the sports business, right? So, I'm curious to know how that came about.
Um, like a lot of things, a lot of coincidences. I recognize capability. I recognize skill sets, but I also believe that you need a degree of serendipity. And I was very fortunate to embark out into the world. And my first job out of college was actually being a security guard. And because I didn't look like a security guard, I ended up securing a high net wealthy individual. And with this high net individual, a few weeks into me securing him, supposedly, he said to me, "You don't need to be my security guard. You need to join my investment arm." And I worked on different aspects of his portfolio. This was in Europe and in Bulgaria, had a touch in Israel, had a touch in the UK. And I was longing to do entrepreneurship. And a year into this, I left, contrary to, a lot of people's advice to some extent, tried my own business and miserably failed, and lost a lot what I'd saved till that day. But again, fortune struck, and I was heard of a job working for another family office. And I went through the process. I got into this family office in Israel. This is a self-made high net individual. And what he was interested to do was invest in startups in Israel out of his own money. We used to invest between $500,000 to $2 million. And it was basically his mission was to just do good in the world, this particular high net wealthy individual. So I had this incredible opportunity to go around Israel, which has innovation and startups popping up like mushrooms after the rain. And I embarked on conversations with entrepreneurs, with scientists. We were going into universities. We were meeting with app developers. Big data, nanotechnology was very big back in 2013. Machine learning was just starting to sort of come into the mainstream. And one day I walk into, shortly after I had joined, I actually get a piece of paper. I was going through an archive of investments that they'd looked at in the fund that I joined. It was just myself and another guy. And I was going through these things and I've come across this company called Replay Technologies. And when you read their 2 pages, which was very interesting, is, to be very candid, I didn't understand it. And I found that intriguing. So I read it again and I still couldn't understand what these guys were doing. So I read it for a 3rd time. And what I did in the 3rd time that I did this was I observed my preconditioned mind. So when you read a lot of these things, what actually happens, particularly when you read like a 2-pager or you read a presentation that comes from someone, often what we do is you take a lot of the things that you've learned in your past experience and you immediately apply them to what's in front of you. Now, when something is genuinely new, you're actually doing that concept a misservice because you're trying to imply a lot of things from your past experience, which are actually not relevant for this particular case. And when I took a step back, and these guys said that they could create the view of the ball as an example, my initial thoughts were they must create some innovative VR experience. They must be creating something to do with a camera positioning. And when I took a step back, what I actually realized that they had invented a new filming format, or at least we're in the process of developing a new filming format. And I met these guys later on in a basement because I found it very intriguing. I liked at the time the individuals who were involved, the founders. I had convinced the fund that this was a good investment to make. And we made a very, very small investment in the last minute as a bridge loan when the company was at a stage where they were literally in a basement. They were actually in a basement, and it doesn't happen a lot in venture today. Today, startups and ventures, whether you're any side of the venture, including the entrepreneurs, they're very rarely in the basements anymore. But these guys were in a basement. And I had the privilege and fortune to invest in these guys, but also create a bond with the founders. So as we became investors in the startup, the connection grew with the founders, and they were consulting me back at the time when I was still an investor. We have this filming format. We can show different perspectives, points of views. And we strongly agreed that through a process of conversations, that sports would be the best place to apply this particular technology. Because it was sort of, this is an industry which isn't regulated per se from like security is. If you want to put something in an airport, as an example, there's a lot of issues of privacy. Medical device, there's a process of, today people are much more aware. There's Helsinki, there's different stages, there's FDA approved. Sports seem to be this area where if I could show you the perspective of Tom Brady or Messi or Ronaldo, if I installed the cameras, there were no regulatory issues around installing them. The only thing I needed, and this is what we understood further down the line, was I need to understand the right structure. So when we came to this conclusion together, it was kind of natural that in this process I join Replay. So I left the family office. I joined Replay as the VP Business Development, to some extent strategy, and we started together to build out the company. We moved out of the basement, or they moved out of the basement and I joined them. And we started to focus our efforts in the sports.
So, so what was that one thing about replay technology is that caught your eye? You've evaluated several sports startups, and then you invested in replay technology. So, what was that one thing about them that made them different to the others?
I think that at the time, first of all, what they were proposing from a technological perspective was revolutionary. So basically, in a similar way that you triangulate on your mobile phone, how does anybody know your location? It's taking the signal that your phone is sending to 2 or 3 different locations from a satellite, and that's how it triangulates, so to speak, where your position is. It's mathematics. I'm not that good at applying this stuff, but that's what it is in general. They were presuming that they could do something similar with light. So if we took an image and we took another image and we took another image, if the 3 images are looking at the same spot and we could triangulate the location, could we then reconstruct a 3-dimensional image from the 2-dimensional images? That proposition, and if you can create the 3-dimensional pixel, then basically you have another dimension of information. And from that, you can extrapolate, as an example, if you construct me in 3-dimension and the object in front of me is constructed in 3-dimension, I can then manipulate the point of view that I'm looking at that other object and vice versa. I hope that wasn't too techy, but the promise behind that was huge. The second thing was the individuals. At the time, the individuals were great individuals, candid individuals, transparent individuals. There were a lot of values there that I felt at the time were very appropriate to lead an investment, and it would take the accountability and responsibility which comes with taking money from individuals. So that was it. The third aspect, I guess, was they had they'd successfully attempted to service the London Olympics in 2012. They had a successful event. They had tried and were piloting with the New York Yankees in New York. And just that, you have an understanding that if these are their first clients they're piloting with, it gives a very good indication of what's to come if the business is executed correctly.
Right. And so you joined Replay Technologies, and then gradually went from starting out in the basement to building what was a multi-billion-dollar company. What was that journey like?
It was incredible fun. It's a sense of family. It's a sense of, we had this side conversation before we started this interview, but I think a lot of people, before you talk about the how and the what, they're looking for the why. Because the working assumption is us collectively, human beings, people are so talented and intelligent that if you put your mind to it, you're probably going to figure out how you're going to do something. You can figure out what you want to do as well. The big question comes around the why. And in Replay, we had this very clear purpose that we wanted to revolutionize the way fans experience sports. I mean, it's very exciting to feel that I could bring to you and to cricket fans, or I could bring to football fans this new perspective on the sports that they love. So couple that with growing a successful company, which of course has all its materialistic benefits, it's just a very, very exciting time. You're constantly experimenting, you're constantly failing, you're constantly trying stuff. It's very lean in a startup, you know. You there's nowhere to hide in a startup. That's another thing which is lovely about those environments. It's you have to take responsibility. You have to be accountable. There just isn't enough people because you're constantly operating in this lean sort of structure. There's nobody else but yourself. So you're put under pressure and challenges where you got to figure it out. You got to come up with solutions, because if there isn't, it falls apart. You're also committed to your other peers and friends within the startup to deliver on whatever it is that you need to deliver.
So, if you had to share one piece of advice, to any startup founder that is looking at scaling up, what would that be?
I think ultimately, and this is talking from a bit of time of experience, not just in startups, it comes down to people. It comes down to people. It comes down to values. It comes down to the culture that you want to facilitate. If you put down the right values, the right principles, if you lead by example and hire according to those values and those principles, you will just grow a culture which can sustain, this immense growth. If people are accountable for what they do, because you're accountable for what you do, then, that's how it's going to grow. And I think that for a time, because my working assumption is from the technical skills, you can identify the right people. Technical skills are something that you can look at resumes or stuff like that. It's the unspoken part which is more challenging within the culture. How do you resolve disagreements? How do you make decisions? How do you keep people focused on the goals? How do you keep your integrity in front of your employees and in front of the customers and organizations that you're working with?
So you've been at Intel Sports now for over the last 5 years. What would you consider to be, one or any more of your key achievements at Intel Sports?
Um, so that's a wonderful question. And as I think about it, I'm also going to tell you what my key failures are. I think it's just as important as success. We talk a lot about winning, but ironically, it's more about the teamwork, you know? So from a successful perspective, I recently have decided to leave Intel Sports, and I'm leaving when, the individuals I've worked with throughout the European leagues, in the Premier League or La Liga, the clubs, broadcasters, everything is in good tact. The individuals who I have worked with that will now carry this torch are well equipped and in a good position to do that. And there's a sense that everything is just in the right place. So from that aspect, growing the business, servicing with integrity is very important. I regard that as a huge success. But also just being very candid with the individuals around me, whether it's the clients, whether it's the team that helps you build this, because it's never just about yourself, but that's obvious. You know, it's galvanizing the people in the organization to believe in soccer. And I'll tell you an interesting story. Initially, soccer in Intel Sports wasn't a business unit, it wasn't a division, because Americans coming in, they don't have soccer, as they call it, as a culture. So there was never really a buy-in to do football as we know it. It was the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, and afterwards, maybe we'll do soccer. So I'm glad that I have been able, with a lot of other individuals in this organization, to bring soccer um, to to the front stage in some aspects, service these incredible clients.
So, Jonathan, you've been in sports technology now for a fairly long time. I'm curious to know your take on where the sports technology industry was 5 years back, where it is today, and how you see it evolving over the next five years.
Hmm. Um, this is a wonderful question because it takes me back to days when a lot of things which are now obvious weren't that obvious in 2000, and you know it's going back 2012, 2013 now, 14. Um, it's changed a lot. I mean, there weren't conferences. You go back almost 10 years, there were barely conferences. The actual term of sport tech, I don't know if it was really coined. I mean, it started to emerge, but it didn't really exist. Back then there was the hype around VR and AR, and mixed reality and all these things. And it was a sense that you were pioneering an area which was just at the verge of a revolution. So it's been a pleasure to see how this industry has matured. It's been incredible to see how the leagues, the right holders, the clubs, and the broadcasters are evolving. You see, like the shifts, the shift in the digitization, the recognition, the understanding that what role is Facebook going to play, what role is Amazon going to play, what roles do you need within these organizations? I mean, within organizations such as La Liga and the Premier League and Sky, what individuals do you need within these organizations to manage and address these new challenges? Where's it going to go? It's going to go as far as we imagine it. I mean, what I have learned from going from, practically an incubation stage of a startup all the way up to this, because we were acquired by Intel, up to this huge corporate, is that it's on the one hand, anything you imagine is going to happen. Just because if you throw enough skill, intelligence, the whole thing, if you can imagine it, it's likely going to happen. What you meet along the way is the processes that need to take place for it to happen. So in technology, that's very evident. The technology is running a lot faster, for instance, than regulation. You can see that, for instance, when someone walks into a stadium today, he has the technology, which he didn't have, say, 25 years ago, to hold up his camera and just film a match. But from a regulation perspective, that content doesn't belong to him. He's not allowed to monetize it. So you have regulation, which is trying to keep up with it. I think that you're going to see, I'm convinced now, as I was then, you're going to see holograms in your room. It's going to be 3-dimensional. You're going to be transported into the stadiums. There's no question about it because the technology already exists. It's now just a process, and this is what you learn through corporate and also through building startups, is that it's usually cycles which are a little longer. It's usually, every cycle is about 5 years. So it's probably by the time that my son maybe is going to college, which is probably 18 years away, that he will be able to experience sport in the way that we hope. And maybe less. Maybe it's 8 years away.
Jonathan, the last question before we let you go is what has been your most memorable live match day experience? But I recall from our previous conversation you mentioned that you can't just it's difficult for you to pick one and because you've got two or three most memorable experiences. So the question for you is, what are some of your most memorable live match day experiences?
Uh, so I'll give you two. I'll give you two. One is very personal, and one is just very grateful to the people who shared the experience with me. The personal one is one of the first matches we ever did in football was in the Berlin Stadium in Germany. And back in the time, we were, when you're in startup mode, everything is still, there's a lot of insecurity, there's a lot of insecurities, there's a lot of uncertainties that come along with everything that you're doing. And we went to service the Champions League final. And thanks to peers in Sky Germany, we had facilitated a system that we put up in the stadium. And what we came to realize is that that stadium was a stadium built back in the regime of Second World War. And that's a very impactful for anybody. I'm Jewish. It's a very impactful and emotional sort of period in the history of the Jewish people. And we were three guys from Israel going to service for the first time in our history, or maybe the first time in football history, a volumetric capturing of maybe the most important game in football, which is the Champions League final. So it was just one of those moments that life prevails, and a sense of being very proud to introduce innovation specifically in that place, coming out of Israel with our backgrounds. The second story I want to tell you actually also has to do with the Champions League final. Is I think that the joy of sports is sharing. That's what it is. It's being to be able to share those moments of something that you love. And Liverpool were very gracious, as have many other of the partners that I've worked with, brought me to witness them celebrating when they won the Champions League final. So I actually was with them in the stands as they were winning. And I think one of the greater moments was just seeing the individuals from Liverpool who had worked so hard, so passionately, in their own way, just as much as the players on the pitch, and this is true for every fan, you know, to see them celebrate that moment of achieving that was very, very exciting. I felt very humbled, very honored to participate in their joy, and that's forever going to be with me.
Jonathan, your journey has been, inspirational, and this has been an extremely insightful conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
So thank you very much. It's my pleasure. I really enjoyed doing this. So really, the gratitude is all to you. I very much appreciate it. And if people come and watch this, then please go see all of the other great interviews that you've done. There's excellent ones on your site, so I strongly recommend it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jonathan.